Okay, folks, welcome to session 12, or workshop 12 if we were face to face. BSBFLM312, contribute to team effectiveness. Well, this is the second last, or the penultimate unit in the qualification. It focuses around teamwork, something that we have spoken about and worked through quite a bit. This brings together quite a bit of the topics and quite a number of competencies that we've already worked through. 4 particular outcomes. Contribute to team outcomes. So how do we contribute to the greater purpose of our team? How do we support team cohesion? So how do we support the other people around us and what the team's trying to achieve? How do we participate? So how do we get in there and get our hands dirty? And then how do we communicate with management? What are we supposed to communicate up? What are we supposed to let management know about, and what aren't we supposed to let management know about? So let's get into it. What's an effective team? An effective team, as opposed to, well, let me take a step back. The difference from an academic perspective, the difference between a group and a team is that a team has a purpose, a combined purpose, and a group is just a cluster of individuals. Now, we mix those two words up all the time, and it doesn't matter really. But if we're going to just think about this academically for a minute, we can say, okay, what makes a team is that a team has a specific purpose that everybody is working towards. What makes an effective team, which is a difference between just a regular old team and a high performance team, is that everybody in an effective team, all the participants in an effective team, are all working for the same purpose, but they're all actually trying to coordinate their work with everybody else in the team. So if you can think about, you've got a cluster of people, and an effective team is a team where those cluster of people are working for the same purpose, but they're also coordinating with each other. So instead of being ineffective, people double handling, people walking around, or still trying to achieve the best, but working around in circles because they're not sure what everyone else is doing or how they're doing it. An effective team has the characteristic of everyone coordinating. So there's a lot of communication, there's a lot of sharing of ideas, there's group decision making, and so forth and so forth. So you start to get some of these. Now we start to see some of these characteristics that we've been talking about a lot through the program, and that's the difference between a regular old team and an effective or high performance team. Or when we say we want a high performance teamwork, that's what we're talking about. Other characteristics of an effective team is that everyone shares responsibility. That is that not one or two people shoulder all the responsibility. And then the very interesting final point there, one of the key characteristics of an effective team is that everyone feels that there's a degree of confidence in their skills. So one of the things that we will find from an effective team or a high performance team is that there's a lot of confidence with each of the members of that team. So not necessarily confidence that they feel they can do everything, but they're confident in what they have to do to contribute to that team. So they're not. If you think about your favorite sporting team, and if you think about when they've been at their peak, and there's not a sense of arrogance, although some high performance team members do show a sense of arrogance, but it's a sense of confidence. They're willing to back themselves because they have that confidence in their own skills, and they also have that level of confidence that the team members will have their back. And we talked about that in the trust and so forth. So as I'm going through this unit, I'm talking about a high performance team. That's really the characteristics I'm talking about. So the very first characteristic of that we've already talked about within the program quite a bit is this idea of the organizational structure and the organizational purpose. Everybody needs to know what the overall goal is, and then I need to know how I contribute to that. And we did this in the work group units where we said, this is, remember we pulled out the organizational structure, but we also then looked at the strategic and operational outcomes of the TCCS, and I had you identify which of those initiatives you contribute to. So this is that whole idea of understanding the organizational purpose, the organizational goals, our team's goals in contributing that, and then my individual contribution to that. So we're all putting our energies in the one direction, and we use plenty. I use plenty of examples and analogies about sporting teams and so forth within that. So that's why that's important to feed into that characteristic of an effective team. To be successful, every team member needs to know and understand what the team's purpose is, what the game plan or the strategy is, and then what's my purpose and approach within that. Just like, and I've talked about this previously, just like that sporting analogy. If I'm playing a defensive position, I need to know what patch of dirt do I need to defend, what players do I need to keep an eye on, how am I going to do that so it coordinates with the other defensive players on my patch of the oval. So that's that whole idea of understanding what the big picture is, understanding what my team's goals are, and then understanding how I contribute to that. The other thing about things like goals and purposes and so forth is it provides clarity around what is to be expected and how the performance is going to be evaluated. So if I know what's expected from me, if I know how I contribute to that team, I know what the performance expectations are, and then I can start having conversations around how is that going to be evaluated. How will I know if I'm doing a good job? What are the indicators of that? Okay, and then what skills and knowledge can I build to achieve that? So if I don't know what I'm doing, if I don't know what the team's purpose is, and I don't know what my contribution to that is, how am I supposed to know if I'm doing a good job or not? That could be, as far as I'm concerned, I might perceive whether I'm doing a good job or not depending on whether I think you as my boss likes me, because there's no other objective criteria. So that becomes really important as part of that, to sort of say, we need clarity around what we're doing so that we know what's expected of us and we know whether we're doing a good job or not. By knowing and understanding the team's purpose, the strategy, team members can understand how they contribute to the team's goals and coordinate their work to support and contribute them. It also helps team members to understand other team members' goals and responsibilities, and that's really important. So I know what everybody else on the team is doing, and how they're contributing. So I'm not sort of working in a silo. I understand the bigger picture. So if we look at activity 1, let's get into some of the activities. The first activity. Number 1, activity 1.1. What are the characteristics of an effective team? Well, I just broke that down. So we're talking about things such as overall purpose. We're talking about things such as understanding what my role within that purpose is, but it's also understanding things such as what everyone else in the team is doing, how I can support other people within the team, how the people in the team support me. These are all characteristics of an effective team where I know what I'm doing, I know what the team's doing, I know how I contribute, I know how other people contribute to me, and so forth. Why is it important for team members to be clear about the team's direction? Well, we've been talking about this quite a bit now. If we've got 10 people and we're working towards we're working to a purpose, but no one knows what that purpose is, that energy, that work output from 10 different people could be in all types of directions, and sometimes that could be in opposing directions. So you actually have people within the team pulling in different directions, and that's just totally ineffective. What we want to do is we want to make sure that we get everybody pulling or putting that energy in the one direction. Why is it important for team members to be clear about their contribution to the team's directions? And I just finished talking about, and we can reflect upon our own experience. If I don't know what I'm doing, if I'm not sure about what I'm doing, and I'm not sure what performance expectations are, what the performance expectations are of me, how can I get that degree of confidence that I was talking about earlier? How can I put in 110% if I'm second guessing whether what I'm doing is right, if I'm not sure about what I'm doing? So I have to have that. I have to be clear about what the team's doing. I have to be clear about what my contribution is, and then I can identify what's performance expectation, and I can identify my skills and my knowledge, and then I can give 120% with confidence, without fear of what if I stuff this up because I'm not really sure what I'm doing or how I'm doing it. A key element within all this, of course, is participation and engagement, and I feel like I've been talking a lot about this through the program because it is one of the staples of high performance teams. Uh, it's important now. If I think about myself as a team member, it is important that as a team member I get consulted, that I understand what's going on, but whenever there are decisions to be made, whenever there is a problem to be solved, whenever there are challenges to be met, I just reflecting on my own experience, I know that I will contribute more and I will have greater buy-in if I am consulted and the challenges or decision making is discussed with me. So taking that, I can then use that as a basis to form opinions. That if I want you to participate, have buy-in, and be engaged with what we're doing, well then I should consult with you. Whether, and I don't have to be a manager for that. That's just as a team member as well on a daily basis. Instead of being instructional all the time, instead of saying, oh, I know best and this is what you need to do, I still may have that opinion. I may still be a senior person within the team and highly experienced, but it doesn't mean I know everything. So I can still engage with you to say, hey, this is what we're doing. You got any thoughts, any ideas? What do you think about this? Okay, well, I got some opinions on that, but I'm interested to hear about yours. And as we've talked about through the communication unit, through the diversity unit, through the conflict management unit, as we have these discussions, we challenge our ideas in a respectful way, and we settle down on something where everyone has a buy-in. And if we can get that participation in decision-making process, and we can get participation in terms of determining what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, when we're going to do it, well then we're all going to have a degree of buy-in, and we're all going to have ownership in what we're doing. So we need to, but for that to happen, we've got to have some mechanisms in place. So we need to have things like regular meetings, regular discussions, whether they're group discussions, one-on-one discussions, whether it's a signage board that we continually have been referencing, whatever suits the work site. We need to be able to empower people in terms of making decision making, in terms of the decision making process. What do I mean by empowerment? Empowerment means that you have the authority to make a decision. So if I disempower you, I take away all your authority. So your job is to perform task A, B, and C. And if there are any contingencies within that, if I say to you, doesn't matter what, if anything deviates from A, B, and C, you need to come to me as your leader or your team leader, your supervisor or your manager to deal with it. I'm totally disempowering you, because all you are then, you're just an extension of a machine. You're just a robot that only does A, B, and C, and if anything's missing, you stop. The alternative to that is that I can actually push some of that decision making to you. So I can say, if anything is outside A, B, and C and it falls within this parameter, let's just say it's if this particular element is different and it's within your scope of responsibility to make a determination about whether that's okay or not, then feel free to make that decision. So we might do this around safety. We might say, if it's A, B, and C, but if you've identified this hazard and the risk is and you make this risk assessment and the risk is low, you can just do something like eliminate the risk and continue on. Just make a record of it, but you can make the decision. Okay, I made a decision that I'm not going to use that piece of equipment and I'm going to substitute it with this piece of equipment. And that's within your scope of decision making. You just need to record that. Now, by giving you the authority to do that, I'm empowering you to make that decision. And the benefit of that is that, one, it makes you feel better, right? We feel better when we can make our own decisions and we don't have to wait for mum and dad, which is our manager, to tell us what we can do, because we're all adults and we like to feel like we can be trusted. And most of us are relatively intelligent. We can make good decisions. So just from makes us feel good, and it makes us feel like we're a valued contributor when we can make decisions about our work. But the other good thing about it, the other really positive byproduct of this is that we're much quicker. So if you are empowered to make decisions within your scope of authority, and you don't have to chase me, your manager or supervisor or team leader, every time a decision needs to be made, you're going to do that task much quicker because you're not wasting your time trying to find where I am or chasing me or trying to get an answer from me. You can just do it. So it's far more responsive. So this is really important in terms of participation and engagement, is to give you give you the information that you need, give you the scope of authority, empower you to make those decisions. You're going to be a lot more engaged. You're going to have a lot more to contribute. You're going to have a lot bigger say in your work environment. And of course, I need to ask if I'm in a role where I need participation and engagement from my colleagues. I need to ask for that. I just can't. For me personally, it's a bit of a cop out just to say, I've got an open door policy. If you got anything to say, if you got anything you want to contribute, just come and see me. Because most of us are too busy to actually go chase stuff up. So when we have an idea, we often go, when I got time, I'll go and talk to someone about that. So if I need to get your feedback and participation, I need to make an effort to go and ask you for it. Say, hey, what do you think about this? Have you got any ideas on that? And of course, as you're giving me the ideas, I need to make sure that I'm taking those seriously. I'm listening. I'm acknowledging. I'm writing down those contributions. I'm like giving you actions to follow up. Yeah, okay, that sounds really good. I can follow that up, and I can get back to you about that. And the last point, which is really important, this is something that I personally do, is that I like to genuinely thank people for contribution, because. Because the key word there is genuinely. I always caution, don't say thank you or please to someone if you don't mean it, because it just comes off as being disingenuous. But if you can genuinely see the value of someone giving you feedback, then don't ignore how valuable it is to actually thank someone. Go, hey, it's really good. Thanks for that feedback. That's really helpful. And sometimes it's like, thanks for that feedback. I probably didn't want to hear that, but it's really important that I have heard it. So I really appreciate you, having the guts to come and talk to me about this in a respectful manner. So it's and what that does is that's that positive reinforcement. People replicate the things that they're rewarded for. So if you want your dog not to dig up the garden, you punish it when it does. So squirt it with a water bottle, and you reward it when it doesn't. You give it some snacks. And we as humans, we're not dogs, but we're a little bit more sophisticated than that. But pretty much at our basis, at our core, we're pretty much the same. We tend to avoid the things that we get punished for, and we tend to replicate or continue to do the things that we get rewarded. So positive feedback is one of those things. When someone who I respect says thank you very much, genuinely says thank you very much, it makes me feel good, because I like it when I can help someone who I really like. So therefore, it encourages me to do it again. Okay, activity 2. How can team members be encouraged to participate in the planning and decision-making process? Okay, this is around consultation. I just talked about participation and consultation. Making sure that we share information, making sure that we genuinely go out there and we consult, making sure that we have those mechanisms in place, like meetings, discussions, whiteboards, whatever those mechanisms are. They're the type of things we need to do to ensure that that people are encouraged to participate. If we don't have any of those things, it's hard for people to really engage in the process. Activity 2.2, how can team members be consulted when developing team goals and plans? Again, within that, just building on what I was just talking about there with the consultation, but this is more talking about those mechanisms that I just alluded to, things like meetings, one-on-one consultations, also things like planning days, project teams. Those things can be really good. Let's have a look at 2.3. It's a team scenario, but I'll get you to work on this. Again, just as last time, if you're working with someone nearby, whether it's phone or face to face, and you can do these together, by all means do it. But if you're not, it doesn't matter. You can still do this on your own. So review the following scenario and develop a plan of action. There is a push from senior management to reduce the organization's absenteeism and turnover rate for the coming new financial year. Your team, like all teams in the organization, have been asked to come up with a range of ideas and potential initiatives that are to be forwarded directly to the chief officer. You've been given the job of holding a meeting with the team to come up with ideas and initiatives. You know that there are a couple of people in the team who, for various reasons, will be quiet and not contribute much. You want to make sure everyone's views are represented and everyone has a voice. What will you do to make this happen? So with this one, it's just basically everything we're talking about, but putting it to a scenario. You can just, when I say plan of action, just some bullet points on things that you're going to do. Please. Thank you. All right, taking responsibility. So we want people to participate. We want to consult. Oops, sorry about that. We want people to participate. We want to consult. We want people to take responsibility and accountability. We want people to say, "Yep, that's my job." That's that sense of responsibility. Yep, that's mine. I will take that. I'll run with it. And accountability, which isn't on this slide, but normally goes hand in glove. Accountability is then to take responsibility for the output. So if we take responsibility for the task, and then whatever happens as a result of that is if we take ownership of that, that's our accountability. So we own the end output. An effective team needs to have this. You need to have people within the team need to take responsibility. Okay, this is, I'm going to defend this patch of turf. I'm going to defend against this player, and then take accountability for the end of that. So when each team member takes responsibility for their work, then what we end up doing is we end up sharing the workload. So it doesn't, we're not leaving it on the shoulders of one or two individuals. But the other good thing about this that we talked about in the diversity unit and in the work teams unit and so forth, is that we can then work to our strengths. If we're sharing the workload, then we can share and distribute that workload according to what people's strengths are, so that we amplify those strengths and then we can minimize those weaknesses. So if I've got particular strengths but I've got particular weaknesses, if I can coordinate with the rest of the team, I can really take ownership of the tasks that require my strengths, and I can really amplify those. So instead of you doing something, let's say for example, there's something really artistic, and you guys have seen my artistic skills in the last slide, so they're pretty good, hey. If there's an artistic element to it, and we've all got to do a little bit of artistic work, if I take my work and your work around the artistic element, I can actually get a better result by using my strengths. But then if it comes to the detail stuff, and I'm really bad at detail stuff, but you're really good at it, if you not only look at your work from a detail perspective, but also take responsibility for looking over my work from a detail perspective, and we coordinate both those things, we're going to get a better outcome just by making sure that we're amplifying our strengths and minimizing our weaknesses. And of course, we need to have that, and we talked about this in a couple of units ago. We need to have that trust. This is all built on this idea that I think I'm very confident you have my back. I'm very confident that I can predict what you're going to do, and so forth and so forth. And by doing this, we're sharing that burden, and that's critical elements within that. And of course, we need to support our colleagues through this, and we can do that by doing things like coaching and mentoring that we've spoken about in other units as well, but also about providing that emotional assistance. One of the things about coaching that is unique about coaching is that it's both, and you think about good coaching, and I might, since I've been bragging about my artistic skills, I'm going to just show you here. One of the things that we think about from a coaching perspective, these two axes. If I think about this in direction. So this axis is direction, and this is high on the axis, and this is low, and this here is support. And what I mean by support is motivation and so forth, and again high and low. When we talk about coaching, coaching falls in this quadrant here. When we talk about mentoring, you know, in the last 2 units ago, I talked about the difference between coaching and mentoring. Yeah, we're talking about here. Yeah, and then we can do things like there's other bits here like delegation. So when someone delegates something to you, they're really they're not giving you direction on how to do it, and they don't have to give you that much support. That might vary depending on so forth. And this here, you know, where it's this is normally, you know, and there's a couple of different versions on this, but this is really normally about supervision up here, high direction, low support, where someone's just standing over you, just watching you. But this here, when we talk about coaching, which is why I'm doing this diagram, this is when we talk about support. When we coach people, we give them high direction. This is if we're asked to give someone some coaching, or we're receiving coaching, we're asking for high direction. And again, I'll use the sporting analogy because, you know, it's a big part of our culture. But the good coaches are the coaches that tell that with a consultative approach, often with their senior teams and like in the leadership groups and so forth, will say, this is our game plan and this is how we're going to do it. But there's also that really high level of support. I believe that you can do this. I believe that if you have the right level of support, you are the best person for this job. You are the best person to take on this task. You can, if I'm in a defensive role, you will be able to stop this player if everyone plays their role and everyone does their part, because you are the best person to take on this job in our team. You know, and that's that high level of support, that emotional support, motivation, all those things that are more about the gameplay in our head rather than the physical attributes of doing the task. So when we talk about things like supporting our colleagues, we're talking not only about things like giving physical support. We're also talking about that emotional support. Things like motivation, things like reinforcement of positive behaviors, you know, feedback and so forth. So providing constructive feedback, recognizing and rewarding effort that I talked about earlier, you know, that reward mechanisms that are in place. Activity 3.1, why is it important for team members to take responsibility for their own work? About sharing the load, about making sure that we're using our strengths, minimizing our weaknesses, you know, making sure that the relationships that we're using and building strong bonding relationships. Why is it important for team members to support others in the team? Well, sort of, again, I've sort of crept into that with 3.1, but 3.2, if we can support other people, they're going to perform at their best, aren't they? And if they're performing at their best, I'm going to be able to do my job at their best, at my best, I should say. Now, and there's no. There was a slide back before with John Dunn's quote in there, but you know, no person is an island. We really aren't. You think about last time you went and purchased a large piece of furniture. You go into, let's say, you go to Harvey Norman, say, I want to buy that couch. The salesperson says, okay, great. Do you want it delivered, or you got a trailer? And you go, oh no, I need it delivered on this particular day. The salesperson will ring up your sale. They will then get your details, and they'll see you at the door. So for you to get the service that you require, that salesperson then needs to pass all your information on to the people out in the warehouse. The people in the warehouse then need to pick your stock from the loading bays. They then need to get all the paperwork with the courier right and get it onto the back of a truck. They need to give all your details to the courier, not only your name and where you live, but what time you've arranged for to pick it up, and how what condition that couch needs to be delivered, so how it needs to be handled and so forth. So, and then hopefully it's going to get to your place at the time that you said, the day that you've agreed upon, in the condition that you've purchased it. But for that to happen, you need this whole team to work together. You need everybody to do, fulfill their responsibilities and do what they said they were going to do. So for me to do a good job, so if I'm that salesperson, for me to come across, for me to get good feedback from you at the end, because at the end you're just going to come back to me and go, hey, that was terrific, Tony, thank you for organizing that. I need to make sure everybody else in the team does their job really well. So it's in my interest to support everybody else, because it makes me able to do my job well. And we're all like that. So if we reflect back in the workplace, for me to do my job here well at Macmillan, there's a myriad of people in the background who support me, so that both at Macmillan and at the TCCS, if we think about, having the room stocked, having it open for us, making sure the IT equipment works, making sure there's coffee and hot water, anytime any of those things have been down, it has impacted on how well I can do my job as the facilitator of the program. And we're all like that, none of us are an island in the way that we work. So it's in our interest to support everybody around us, because it makes us able to perform better. So, long-winded answer for 3.2. 3.3, how can team members be supported by managers, leaders, and colleagues? Well, I think we've gone through that. I'll leave that up to you. There's plenty of stuff in there. Again, a recap on the constructive feedback. Make sure that we provide constructive feedback in private. Remember, constructive feedback isn't critical. We're actually giving people feedback to build on. We describe behaviors, not personalities, and this is the idea of, play the ball, not the man. So not, Tony, you're hopeless or you're useless or you always stuff this up. These are the behaviors that we need to focus on. Be specific, provide factual information, and I mentioned this a couple of sessions ago. If you can't be factual, then you're not ready to provide constructive feedback. Be empathetic, be collaborative, working together. Remember the conflict model. Collaboration is about having an outcome that all parties agree upon. Ask for help in resolving the problem. Reach agreement on actions and who's going to do what when. Get an agreement on how we're going to follow this up. And then never use it as a punishment. So, don't give feedback because it makes you feel better. And what I mean by that is, don't just use it as a rant or a vent. And always try and leave both of us motivated to continue. And of course, this very tasty looking hamburger. Back to that hamburger, where the bread is the positive and the middle is the constructive stuff. So, Tony, I just want to give you some feedback about this task. Steps 1, 2, 3 were really great. There's a couple of things I want to talk about with 4, 5, and 6. Can you explain to me why you did that? Oh, okay, all right. Are you aware that the process is this? Is there anything that's stopping you from able to meet that process? Is there any support I can give you? Do you need any training? You want me to do a little bit of coaching? Did you want me to hang around a bit while you're doing it? Okay. All right, that's terrific. Okay. Look, as I said, steps 1, 2, and 3 were terrific. We've worked on 3, 4, and 5, and I'm really confident that you've got a hang of those. So now I feel that you're really going to be able to smash this out, and it's going to be terrific and the outcome. And I'm looking forward to see what the results are. And in that example, I started with a positive, gave some constructive feedback, finished up with that positive, and then hopefully that's leaving us both really motivated with what we're doing. And as I said, don't hesitate to not only give constructive feedback, which is helping people to build, but also recognizing when good stuff has happened and thanking. And you don't have to be a manager to do this. I mean, this is a leadership unit, but you don't have to be a formal manager or supervisor or team leader to provide positive feedback to your colleagues. It is a great tool to reinforce positive behavior. But when we're giving positive feedback, making sure that we do it as soon as possible, as close to the event as possible, so it It doesn't feel, the longer you leave it, the more awkward those conversations become. So as soon as possible, be specific. You know, you can be, oh look, I just want to thank you very much for that job, but then dig in and go, you know, in particular, I really want to thank you for that particular thing that you did, because that has really helped me. And it's always nice when you can give a little personal spin to that. So that's helped me and the team this way. Um, don't give positive feedback with caveats. You know, oh, that was really good. Yeah, it's not as good as Fred's or Jill's on the team, but that's pretty good. Yeah, that's an example of that caveat. You know, just keep it positive. Just stop it. That was really good. This particular stuff was really good. Um, if you want to, if you're in a leadership role and you want to raise it at the meeting, just to sort of say, I just want to let everyone know what Tony did, make sure that you get my permission first, because most people like that. But sometimes people feel a bit awkward about it, so you need to just take that into consideration. And of course, when I've been talking about rewards, rewards can be both extrinsic, which are extrinsic rewards are mainly tangible rewards. So things like, you know, in private organizations, you might have things like, you know, the bonuses, or oh geez, I don't even know if they still give out shares schemes where you might get shares as part of a bonus program. There are entitlements, like some workplaces you might get a staff discount card and stuff like that. You might get extrinsic rewards, which are tangible rewards again, such as gift cards, awards, you know, Employee of the Month award, and so forth, which will be in a certificate. So in that sense, like the certificate's the extrinsic, or you team-based ones, which are really good if you're working in say, for example, a government organization. You can do like social get-togethers, like put on a morning tea, and it doesn't even have to cost the workplace. You can just say, everyone bring something for morning tea. We're just going to have a celebration for what we just, you know, for this significant achievement. So they're the extrinsic ones, but rewards can also be intrinsic, and these are the things that are non-tangible, so they don't cost anything other than maybe a little bit of your time and effort. Things like just saying thank you, and that can be both verbally, or it can be in something like a card, a note, just something that can make it a little bit more permanent. Intrinsic rewards can be things like the acknowledgements I talked about before. You know, so do you mind if I share this with the team at the next team meeting? Some people find that a big incentive. They'll go, yeah, for sure. Or they might go, oh, okay, I suppose. But inside they're going, oh, yeah, that's awesome. That would really elevate my standing amongst the team. Or even just, you know, sometimes an intrinsic reward can be, you know, just a pat, normally a thank you and a pat in the back, you know, things like that. So just, you know, just bearing in mind that, you know, you don't have to have something physical to actually reward someone. Just taking the time. You know, I'm working with someone at the moment who is in the front line of the whole COVID-19. You know, they're working on the front line with people who are at high risk. Their team is working with people at high risk, so the team's at risk themselves. And one of the things that they're doing, which is getting really positive feedback, is that they're just taking the time each day to walk around and just thank everybody. Just check if they're okay. Are you okay? How are you going? I just want to say thanks for what you're doing. And that's not like it's not lip service. It's just genuine thank you. So you've got to be specific about that, and you've got to show empathy and so forth. But the amount of feedback that they're getting back from the people going, you know, you don't know how much I really appreciate that, because I'm just really struggling with the burden of what I'm doing, and it feels like it's thankless, and just taking the time to do that has meant a lot. You know, so it does, and that's a reward that doesn't cost anything other than just the time and effort. So just think about when we think about rewards, you know, we're often quick to go, oh yeah, you know, we work in government, we can't do any of that. Well, yeah, that's true, but only if we're talking about extrinsic stuff. If you can do the intrinsic, it can be powerful if used correctly. Activity 4, what steps should be followed when providing feedback to team members? Just go back to our constructive feedback. and positive feedback. I don't think I need to go through that again. And how can team members' contributions be rewarded? Think about some of those extrinsic ones, such as, if we're talking about government context, it might be things like certificates of appreciation and so forth, but mainly intrinsic ones, which can be like a pat on the back, thank you, acknowledgement at team meetings, those type of things. We talked about support before, supporting your colleagues, but also supporting to resolve any issues. So an effective team member supports the team to identify and resolve problems and this is going back to our problem solving steps, gathering the facts regarding the situation, if safe, approaching the colleagues them directly. So, if someone's having a challenge, and we had scenarios in other units where, we got feedback about one of our colleagues not working up to, not performing up to standard, and we talked about, if it's safe, go and talk to that colleague first. Say, hey, got this feedback. What do you think? Is there anything I can do to help? Do you want to debrief on it? Do you want me to support you? Want me to provide you some coaching? That type of thing. But working with that person, using our engagement strategies, asking for their feedback, asking for their contributions, and then making sure we have those follow-up mechanisms that we've been talking about ad nauseum. In some cases, we will have to escalate things up to management, and it's a question of what do we need to escalate? Well, if it's outside of our scope of decision making or responsibility, we need to shoot it up the chain. So and we talked about this in the other units. So for example, if there's an issue that comes to our attention and it's to do with code of conduct breach or a red breach, that's outside of our scope of responsibility and authority to act. We'll escalate that to the right channels. If it's a significant health and safety issue, something that is not a low risk but a high risk, and the process is to be escalated, then we do that. If there's a potential that it's breached legislation or significant policy, like the red I talked about, but it might be Privacy Act, it might be Anti-Discrimination Act, even if we've resolved it. So say you see someone giving someone else an inappropriate back rub, we might act on it straight there and we go, hey, Tony, can I pull you aside? Hey, I don't know if you're aware of this, but do you realize that what you're doing there is actually illegal? And you can talk about the policy and so forth, and Tony goes, oh geez, I had no idea. Okay, thanks, I'll stop that straight away. We still have a responsibility to escalate that up. So in those type of scenarios, wherever it's outside of our scope of responsibility or accountability, which is around our authority, decision making, if it's a breach against legislation, and that can be external legislation such as law, or it can be internal policy and procedure, we need to escalate that. And often when we talk about communicating with management, every manager is different about how they like to be kept in the loop. So one of the first things that we need to do is we need to think about how our manager likes to be kept informed, and that often means you got to ask them, how much info do you want? How do you want that info? Do you want it by email? Do you want me to tell you verbally? Do you want it as soon as it happens, or do you want me just to touch base with you when I get back in the depot? You're finding out from asking them specifically how they like their information and how they like to be kept in the loop. I've got this situation, boss. I'm keeping my eye on it. How do you want me to keep you in the loop on this? Do you want to know when it's resolved, or do you want me to know at critical points, or do you want me to give you an update every day, or what do you want me to do? So through that, you might schedule regular contact. And if it's a formal issue, you might set up a set agenda. But one of the big things, with that agenda, making sure that we keep a paper trail, often via email, so that you've got an electronic footprint of that, and you can refer back to it at any point, and it doesn't get lost. And then following up when required. But I just want to go back to that third last point, because this is a really big one. One of the consistent bits of feedback that we get from management when they talk about their gripes with team members is that they always complain that that they're bombarded with information. I just, Tony's always coming to me and he's just telling me all the stuff I don't need to know. And when I talk to Tony, you're going, well, they want to be kept. They've told me they want to be kept in the loop. One of the things when we always need to keep in mind when we communicate up is that you always lead in with the big picture. So you always give a overview first. You say, hey Tony, I've got this issue, and just broadly, I've got this issue. There's a little bit of resistance to this change of work approach. I think I've got it. How much info do you want me to keep in the loop about that? So you just sort of go in with the big picture, and then ask the manager if they want more detail. So if I go, how much info do you want on that? And I go, look, just keep me in the loop. Then you know that you just need to give high view info. If I say, look, this is pretty important and it's happening in other areas and I really need the info on that, then you can go in with more detail. The trap that people often fall into is that they go in with all the detail first, and it gets overwhelming for the managers, because the managers, and I just, at the risk of bamboozling you with my great skills, my great drawing skills. If I go back to this is the organizational pyramid. And this is why this is important. So we've got one manager. One manager has a couple of director has a couple of assistant general managers. You got then a couple of middle managers, and you got a couple of frontline managers, and then you've got a team. And that's how we get our organizational pyramid, because the same thing's happening over on this side, and so forth. Your scope of what's going on is just this bit here. Let's get fancy. So your scope of what's going on is just this little bit here. So when you go in with your detailed information here and you talk to your manager about that, and this person goes in with detailed information, talks to your manager about that, and this person goes in with their detailed information, it just becomes too much information. So all of a sudden you've got the information of 4 people trying to fit into one person. So you have to sort of come in at the appropriate level. So the level of information that you need to come in is at this level here. And then if they want it, then you can dig into the level of detail that you do your job at. And then this manager needs to do the same thing when they communicate with this manager, and so forth. So really, at this level, the person running the organization, they don't know the nitty-gritties of doing the job. That's why they need to have good consultation skills, so they can get access to that when they need it. So when we're going up, we need to go up at the level of detail of the role that we're reporting to, and then, but always be prepared to come in with more detail at our level, or even if we're here, even with this level here if required. That's some pretty fancy drawing, hey? And that's what you want to. That's why. Let's get this slide back up. That's why one of my key tips around communicating with management is always leading with the big picture and say, hey, just want to give you an overview of what's going on. Do you want more info, or are you happy just with this snapshot? And then let them be the guide of that. Activity 5, a junior and inexperienced team member comes to you with a concern they have about a colleague not doing their job properly. They don't have the confidence to address it directly with the colleague, and have come to you for assistance in addressing it. How can you assist them in addressing the issue? So we'll just go back to the supporting slide that I was going back to before, in terms of providing that, talking to the person, getting them engaged, asking for their ideas at consultation, providing that support for them. So we might be looking at coaching, we might do some mentoring there, and so forth. And in what circumstances would you need to refer it to management? And we talked about things like, if there's a breach outside of, if we're looking for a breach outside of policy, procedure, legislation, or just outside our scope. Let me just get this workbook up. Okay, so that was 5. Yeah, so that's 5. Okay, so activity 6. What are your actions as a team member? Why are your actions? Oh, hang on. Let me just go back to the slide here. Activity 5, and then we go 8. Okay. Activity 8. Oh yeah, okay, so I've just jumped. I've gone from 5 to activity 8. And we'll come back to 6 and 7. Okay, so activity 8. Give 3 examples of where information should be communicated to supervisors and managers. 8.2. How should information be communicated to supervisors and managers? So think about things such as emails and verbal and through team meetings and so forth, but also think about some of the points I said earlier about going in big picture, going with an overview and then coming up behind with a detail if it's required. What methods can be used to communicate information to supervisors and managers? Well, I just sort of gave some of the answers there in terms of emails, verbal, through meetings, and then a scenario. Again, this is in pairs, but you can work on this on your own. As a senior member of the team, your colleagues have previously approached you about the condition of the toaster in the tea room. They're concerned that because of its age and wear and tear, that it's on the verge of becoming unsafe and needs to be replaced soon. They have asked you if you could raise it with your manager, which you agreed to. You sent your manager an email stating the team's concerns and your proposal for replacing the toaster. It's been a week and you haven't heard anything back from your manager yet. How would you propose to follow it up? What will you say? And then just write your response below. So you can write it down as an email at the bottom of that activity. Hey Tony, I spoke to you about da 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 da. Have you been able to follow it up, or have you had the opportunity to pursue it, etc. I'll leave that with you to work through that. Okay, now I want to go back to activity, the topic of activity 6, which is role modeling, and we've talked a bit about role modeling, but just to bring it back into this context, and a lot of what I've been saying through this unit and the previous units as well, because we're now at the frontline management. So when we do BSB and I go through that code, I go BSB, which is the business services package, and then I go FLM, which is the frontline management. So these units are actually from the management component of the package. So a lot of this is about leadership and management capabilities when we're looking at these units. So things like consulting, collaboration, doing all those type of things are kind of management units, management competencies that we should all be applying. But you don't have to be in a formal leadership role to take or you don't have to be in a formal management role to take a leadership role. There are plenty of teams where team members look to other colleagues for leadership. So you may have a manager, or you may have people in formal management roles, but there will be other, and I call them tribal elders. There are other tribal elders amongst the group that the workers will look towards for direction. So if those tribal elders, and it's, I don't know, that's probably not a good term, but if those tribal elders give the thumbs up and go, yeah, that's really good, then everyone sort of falls in line. That influences the tone of the group. If those tribal elders, put the thumb down and go, that's horrible, then again, that influences the tone of the group. So everybody, and that's just one example of where you don't need that formal authority to play a leadership role. So that means that anybody within the team, anybody within any team can play a leadership role. So we think about that in the way that we behave, and we go, okay, well, I may be in a leadership role, or I may be in a formal leadership role, or I may not. I still play a leadership role within this team. So role modeling becomes really important. How I behave and how I conduct myself will set an example for others around me. So if I behave in a way that's positive, others will follow that. if I behave in a way that's not so positive, it gives people the opportunity to follow that. So it gives other people confidence. If I'm doing the right thing, it gives other people confidence to fall in line with me, because everyone loves a bit of company. So what do we talk about when we talk about role modeling? Well, we're talking about this thing about, walk the talk. You say the right things, but then you're doing the right things. And again, I'll go back to that point I've made earlier, that we judge other people by their actions. We judge ourselves by our intentions. And this is, so this is the idea that it doesn't really matter what we intend. I intended to finish that job off, but, something distracted me, or something, took me away from it. Yeah, that's probably a really good reason for that, and it's probably you've justified in that. But that intention doesn't matter to other people. What matters is what I actually did. So, they're judging me by my actions, the same way that I'm judging other people by their actions, not necessarily their intention. So, and I think that's really important to bear in mind, because often we wonder why people get cranky with us when we wanted to do the right thing, but just something stopped us. Why are they cranky with us? Well, they're just doing what's natural, and it's the same thing that we do to other people, and that is we judge by what the behaviors, not by what the intents are. And I'm not saying always, but just generally speaking. So we need to walk the talk, say the right things, but also make sure that we're really pig-headed about getting it done, do the right things. And then we can encourage others. If we do that, we have the moral right then to encourage others to do that. It's not like do as I say, not as I do, which is the opposite of sense of saying, well, I know I'm doing different, but there are reasons for that, but I need you to do it this way, which is not what we would say is a good role model. Recognize and appreciate other positive role models. So gravitate towards people who are similar or like-minded. Why are your actions as a team member important in being a positive role model within a team? We talked about this in the culture framework, saying that culture, an organization's culture is where there's a set of norms, and if everyone is behaving in a positive, everyone acts as a positive role model, and everyone's acting in a positive way, that will set that as a norm. It will have a positive cultural influence. Activity 6.2. I just might get this up and let's have a look at it. Which one? I want that one. Okay, activity 6.2. In groups, identify and describe behaviors that act as role models, act as a positive role model. Present your findings to other participants. Okay, so you don't have to worry about the whole present your findings to other participants, and you can just work on this on your own. Think about those behaviors that describe a positive actions. So in your mind's eye, think about a positive role model, and you'll think about things like, good communicators, are trustworthy, are positive, constructive, are resilient, always look for opportunities, and so forth, and just break that down in terms of positive behaviors. I want to talk a little bit about performance models, and I don't want to get hooked on this too much, but I just in the workshop I'd planned to talk about this a lot more, but just in the context of what we're doing. So when we look at performance, this one here, this multicolored pyramid is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maslow said that we work up this way. So in terms of things that motivate us, we need if we have nothing else, we're motivated by our physiological needs. So if we're dropped in the middle of the Sahara Desert, what will get us to act, that will get us off our backside and to do stuff, is our urgent need for physiological needs, water and food and shelter. But once we find those things, so we get up off the sand and we run over a couple of dunes and we find an oasis and we create a shelter from the trees there, and we plant some plants, and I don't know, do your Minecraft. If you played Minecraft with your kids, you create some wheat and get some food, and then that will no longer motivate you. What Maslow then says is that we need this We need security. We need to feel safe. So in a workplace context, that's about making sure that we feel safe in our workplace. So instead of being casual, we're now permanent. You know, the workplace is stable. It's not like a threat of going under. Or our safety mechanisms are in place. If none of that exists, Maslow says that's what motivates us. Is like we'll get a job and we'll get to work on time every day and work really hard until we're made permanent. And then once we're made permanent, that will no longer motivate us. What we then need in this model, it says love and belonging, but this is social. So broadly speaking, this is our social needs, and that is that we need to feel like we belong to the work team. So it's no longer motivating us that we get permanency, that we have security and safety. What we're now looking for is we're looking to belong to part of the team. And then once we belong as part of that team, once we get accepted into the team, that will no longer motivate us. We now look to be well regarded amongst the team. So we need to be respected. We need to have some type of status, and we need to be recognized for that within the team. So Tony is now the expert. Tony is the expert on IT matters within the team, for example. And that makes me feel good. Keeps me motivated. And then Maslow said, and then eventually, this self-actualization to be the best that we can be, the most creative, Maslow would say, and best we can be. So this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs in terms of us as people. When we look at it from a workplace perspective, we really talk about this. Workplaces need to make sure people feel safe and secure, and then that they belong to the team, and then they're recognized and involved with what we're doing. So a lot of the stuff, modeling stuff that we've been talking about today, effective teams, sort of comes out of this middle bit here. Hertzberg, he took this Maslow's model and he said, well, it works a little bit different. He said, you kind of split it in half, which is this baseline here, and he says, these things here, like security, physiological needs, and safety and security needs, this part, the bottom half of the pyramid, he said that stuff doesn't motivate you. It demotivates you if it's absent. So it's not, that stuff doesn't, like getting permanency. If you're casual, getting permanency doesn't necessarily going to, or insecure or not having a safe work environment isn't necessarily going to motivate you. It's going to make you bloody cranky if it's absent. It won't motivate you. It demotivates you if it's not there, right? And then everything above that, that's the motivation factor. So the personal growth, the opportunity for promotion or improvement, greater responsibility and accountability, recognition and achievement, that stuff's motivational. So it's very similar, except he takes this stuff and says that's not motivational, it's demotivational in its absence. So he's saying at a very bare minimum that stuff needs to be present. This model here is the one I find most pragmatic. So these two are really good theoretical, but on a day-to-day basis, they're not really that useful. This one here in the middle is, when I'm working as part of a team and someone is underperforming, in my opinion, and I'm trying to work out why so I can help them, I always go to this model as a baseline. Performance is a combination of someone's ability, do they have the skills? Organizational support, do they have the tools and the ways of doing it, so they know work process? Do they have the resources required? Do they understand what the final goal is supposed to look like, and so forth? And then effort, which is the physical effort that the individual puts in, and that's a combination of how important it is to them and how much they expect to get it. So when we think about performance, and this is the one that I like to harp on a little bit because it's really pragmatic. If I or anybody else has a performance shortfall, don't just go straight to the effort, which is they're just not trying hard enough. Well, they might be trying, or they might not be trying hard enough, and that's because they don't feel these two things are in place. So the first thing is like, okay, let's identify the gap. Is there a skills gap? And working on that. And we've talked about that through the program. And then, do they know what they need to do? Do they understand do they know what their turf is? Do they understand which player they're supposed to be defending? Do they have the proper equipment to defend them? So do they have the right boots on? All those type of things, because it doesn't matter how much ability you have, it doesn't matter how much effort you put in. If you don't have any of this, you're going to be running around like a chook with no head. So making sure that all those things are in place, and once we know that the once we can tick off that they've got the ability, and once we can tick off that they've got the organizational support, then we can start thinking about why doesn't this person think that this job's or this task is very important, and we can start having those conversations. So activity 7, what are some barriers to individual and team performance? So just go back over those models, and you can think about lack of skill, lack of understanding goals, lack of having the resources, or lack of seeing value in it. Or you can use Maslow's insecurity, not feeling like they don't belong to the team, all those type of things that you can, potential barriers. What can you do as a team member to support others in removing performance barriers? I'll leave that one a bit open actually, because there's quite a bit that we've talked about that you can pluck out through that. Okay, activity 8. Give 3 examples of where information should be communicated to supervisors and managers. Oh no, we've already done this one, haven't we? No, we did 9. No, we've done this one. Yep. Okay, we can skip that one. So that's, I just want to confirm that that's on. That was earlier. Yep. So we've already done 8, so that's cool. So we're right to go straight to the final project. Okay, so let's look at the final project. In groups of 3, review the snowstorm scenario and undertake a meeting to address the issues raised. I might just read through that scenario if that's okay. I know it'll push this video a little bit further, but just to help. So this, I actually took this scenario out of the archives, the National Archives, from a snowstorm that happened in Bathurst in 1900. So I sort of love these little history articles. Okay, so snowstorm. So I'll bring up the snow fell heavily today, beginning at 5 a.m. and continuing throughout the day. It lies in the streets a foot deep. Business is practically suspended. The telegraph wires are down in all directions and telephone communication in the city is suspended. The telegraph lines are down for miles. The morning's passenger train was blocked at Loxley for 3 hours. Goods traffic was partially suspended. Several verandas in this town collapsed during the morning. It was the heaviest fall of snow ever known here, exceeding in duration and in quantity the snowstorm in June 1896, which up to that time was the severest in Bathurst. The snow ceased at 5:30 p.m., having fallen uninterruptedly for 12.5 hours. When the fall ceased, it lay in the middle of the streets to a depth of 18 inches. Beyond the solitary butcher's or baker's cart, there was no traffic throughout the day, and several of the shops closed early, no business being possible. When night closed in, the snowballers having ceased operation, the town resembled a silent city. Telegraph communication with Sydney was restored by 3:30 p.m. That's pretty trippy. So just using that scenario just as a creative basis for us. You're a supervisor at the local depot. The depot boss calls in, and we're pretending it's modern day now. The depot boss calls in all supervisors for an emergency meeting when you all finally arrive at 5:30 a.m. The snow had just started to fall heavily, and they informed you that it's going to continue all day, with the weather forecast predicting up to 18 inches of snow by the end of the day. The heaviest snowfall is predicted to occur during the middle of the day. The boss wants the depot to drop the business as usual stuff and pull together to work on top priorities. He issues you with their priorities, which is responding to emergency callouts for shoveling clear walkways and paths, responding to emergency callouts for ploughing roads and driveways, responding to emergency callouts for de-icing roads and paths. There's also a snow rides assignment. This involves having a team on transport duty. The team will respond to emergency requests for pickups and drop-offs. The boss's administration team will triage requests as they come in and allocate the jobs out in order of priority. The boss has divided the entire depot's operational staff among the supervisors. So you can either do this in groups or you can do this individually given the circumstances we're under. If you've got, again, if there's someone that you can either, sit down with and do this at a distance of 1.5 meters as of the current day in which I'm recording this, or you might even pick up the phone and do this with someone over the phone. You can. If not, just I'm happy for you just to work on it on your own. As a supervisor team, break up and allocate the areas of priorities amongst yourselves. So imagine there's 3 of you. If you're working on this on your own, you can do as 3 of you. How would you break it up? If there's just 2 of you, you can break it up as 2. If you're just on your own, just break it up in however you would like to. Discuss and clarify the responsibilities for each team. If you're working on your own, that's obviously not going to be able to do that. And outline your strategy of how you're going to provide direction, leadership to enable the team to do their best. Have them work well together and keep them motivated all day. So in this case, just write it down in what your strategy is going to be. Outline the protocols that you will put in place and any problems that pop up during the course of the day, including communication issues up the line, and outline how you will manage communication of information to and between the teams. So if you're working on this on your own, just address those things. Outline your strategy of how you're going to provide direction and leadership to the team, outline your protocols that you're going to follow, and outline how you're going to keep the comms opened. If you're working as a group on this, just follow that. Just get together as a group, break up the responsibilities. Okay, Tony's team's going to take this, Bob's team's going to take this, such team's going to take this, and then come up with your strategy as a group. Again, as usual, if you have any concerns or any queries about that, you just shout out, and I can make adjustments as required. So that's the final project. So that's the 4 outcomes that this unit. So we've covered off, by going through this unit, we've covered off contribute to team outcomes, supporting team cohesion, participating in the work team, and communicating up the chain when required. Communicate with management. Hopefully that was okay, guys. A lot of this stuff is becoming repetitive now, and it's just because we're getting towards the end of the program. If we were doing this in the workshops, we sort of break it up a little bit to build on other workshops, but because of the nature of what we're doing, it's probably, I recognize it's probably getting a little bit repetitive. But hopefully that's given you some clarity around the content and around the activities. As usual, if you have any questions, don't forget to pop me an email or or pick up the phone. And again, tony@macmillan.net.au is my email, or my phone number, which is 0407014829. And if you want to mail in your work, that's the Macmillan postal address. Okay, thanks folks. One more after this one, so I'm going to shortly do the sustainability one. Hopefully you can have access to it also. If you want to smash through this pretty quickly, you can get through it without waiting too long. Okay, thanks again. Cheers.